Please take your seats. The meeting is about to begin. Remember to speak into the microphone, as this meeting is being recorded for public record. Please take your seats. The meeting is about to begin. Remember to speak into the microphone, as this meeting is being recorded for public record.
Good morning, and thank you everyone for joining our Finance and Economic Resiliency Committee meeting. Thank you to my colleagues who are here. We're still waiting for a couple of more on the way, but wanted to get started timely. Jason, Tamika, thank you for all your hard work on the budget. Eric, obviously, as well. Also want to give a big shout out to everyone. I know there's a lot of work going into emergency management for hurricane season, so thank you to our entire city and certainly first responders for the work on that. A lot of work goes into the budget. You, Tamika and Jason, you do a lot of it behind the scenes. Obviously now it's coming to the forefront, to us, obviously as a commission, to the public. But I've been very pleased that not just me, but our commission really focuses on the best use of our taxpayer dollars, trying to streamline the process, prioritize what is important to our residents. And I've been laser focused on that. I know my colleagues are as well. We need to make sure that every penny we're spending is for the benefit, safety, cleanliness, dry streets, really quality of life issues. And I think we're heading in the right direction. So thank you for that.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. We will, I don't know if you want to mention anything.
I would just like to also thank the finance and budget teams for all of the work, as well as all of the budget liaisons in all the departments. This is a real collective effort, and it takes a significant amount of time because this is really where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. So thank you for all of the efforts from everyone, and looking forward to have some spirited discussion.
And good morning. I'm going to intervene. Need to make an announcement. Today's meeting of the Finance and Economic Resiliency Committee has been scheduled in hybrid format, with a quorum of the committee physically present and remaining members, staff, and members of the public appearing either in person or virtually via Zoom. In order to participate in today's meeting virtually, members of the public may dial 1-888-475-4499 and enter the webinar ID, which is 863-6059-5462#, or log into the Zoom app and enter the webinar ID, which again is 863-6059-5462. Any individual wishing to speak on an item must click the raise hand icon if they are using the Zoom app, or dial *9 if you are participating by phone.
And of course, thank you to our chair of the Finance Economic Resiliency Committee, Commissioner Magazine.
So we will get started. So there's two elements to our presentations today. There's a very, very short update, just where we are on the operating side because of the June 1st property tax initial estimates that came out. Today's meeting is almost exclusively related to giving an update and the recommendations on our capital program. So we'll get started by pulling up the first presentation. Okay. So we talked about, we're just going to really give an update on what has transpired since our retreat that we had in May. And what we got on June 1st went out to everyone via letter to commission was our property tax value. So June 1st, our values came in and we had a total increase of 6.9% on our property values. We have a couple other ones listed there. There are two elements really to it, and we'll get into that detail of existing values versus new construction. So here's a longer term trend showing over the past almost 20 years of property values. You can see they kind of do move up and down quite dramatically in some cases here. But this is our fourth year in a row of pretty good high numbers there. I know, as we've always been kind of telegraphing and talking about, is we have continuing decreasing increases. 6.9% valuation increase is still a very good overall number. When you dive into those numbers a little bit more, when you look at our existing values, we have an increase of 5.3. So that is exclusive of the new construction. New construction gave us a little bit of a boost there. I know as we had spoken about, when we had our briefings and such, we talked about how some of our, views of long-term valuation increases on existing, it's probably in the 3 to 5% sweet spot there. And a lot of that has to do with the Save Our Homes, where you have your taxable value usually has ended up being much lower than your market value. So that you may have swings of a 20% decrease in market values. There's a very, very good chance that your taxable value is much lower than that, and will just slowly continue to creep at that 3% valuation. So here's our new construction. You see it's very spiky over the years. Sometimes, pardon me, not very much. This year we had about $900 million in new construction added to the tax rolls. Almost all of that, about 700 and change million, was related specifically to the 5-park construction project.
And Mr. CFO, how much tax off of that $700 million flows into Miami Beach? Rough estimate, just based on existing millage rates, just to quantify that.
Well, we're getting the 900 billion, so you mean how much is that?
Of assessed value, and how much from an annual tax standpoint?
I could calculate that in a few seconds.
We'll calculate that
Yeah.
real quick. So let me just see if there's anything else on here. So that was the new construction, as we had talked about. We sometimes have very lower amounts, when negligible in the $100 or $200 million. So whenever we have a new project come online, that does really help boost our valuations. I'll keep going. I'll go.
Okay.
So this just shows where we were back in May. This was before we had any valuation increases, and we were at approximately a $19 million budget gap, which is very normal that the city has that until we get our valuation increases. Our current service level, or CSL, as you know it's called, everything we did do today, we do tomorrow, was only increased our general fund by 4.4%. We would have needed 7.2% valuation to hit that break-even mark. And as we talked about in the retreat, there's other elements to revenues in the general fund which were just not performing as well, and that's why we had that increase. So this is where we stand as of today on the preliminary general fund. After the 6.9%, we're at approximately $771,000 in total. We still have the July 1st numbers that come in. Last year was actually a 0.6 increase we got total. So we're cautiously optimistic that we will be able to get this back into black just on that adjustment alone when we come July 1st. So again, July 1st will be the one where we go through the operating budget and go into the specifics of that. And this just wants to show, just to highlight, this is what our current millages are. We're not going to be going into what our millage rates are now. The July budget workshop is where we'll get more into that and look at a recommendation from the administration on that situation. And then resort taxes, really there's no update since the retreat. We're not showing any gap. It's a break even because we're covering it with a decrease in the transfer over to the general fund, which also caused a bit of a problem. And just to wrap up this section is just to talk about the next step. So we are here today to talk about our capital budget. July 1st, we will get the final valuations in. You'll have an LTC that will come out shortly thereafter showing where we ended up. July 11th is a very important meeting. It's in all of your calendars. It is our second FERC budget briefing, which will go into the detail of the operating budget. There we'll be talking about enhancements, efficiency reductions, and things like that to bring a balanced budget as we are required to do. At the July 23rd commission meeting, we'll have probably a 10 a.m. time certain to set the millage rates. That is the maximum millage rate. So that won't necessarily be what we're going to charge people. That's what we're going to tell. That's the max. That will go out in the trim notices that will be sent up by the county tax collector in August to all the residents. And then on September 17th, we'll have our first budget hearing. And on September 30th, we will have our second one, which will set those final rates. And then October 1st, we will start our new fiscal year. But I think Tamika has the answer to that question.
So it's 5.7 million.
5.7 million,
Yes.
and that is just into the city. That's not
Just for the
split
city.
amongst the county. So
Yes.
that is what new growth can do, right? So imagine if we decided not to grow as a city, we'd be sitting here looking at an already strained budget and subtract $5.7 million every single year from that. So, you know, while I know when we talk about growth and development can be push and a pull, and oftentimes finding that right balance, that one single project brought $5.7 million annually into our coffers.
Okay. All right, and then we can bring up the presentation again, and this is the meat of what we're here to discuss today.
All right, next slide. Good morning, everyone. So again, this is just a focus on the capital budget, and the overall capital budget is a policy statement for the government. It tells us where our priorities lie and where we're actually going to program our funds. So what you're seeing in your package is a large fold out, and it's a 5-year plan from FY26 to FY2030. We are going to focus today on what we're recommending for FY26 only, and we'll just move to the next slide. So this shows our timeline for our budget process. So we started back in December. All the departments provided their project requests. Between February and May, we had several operating and capital budget meetings to prioritize the projects. And today we're in June, and between now and July, we're going to have 2 meetings with the commission to make our recommendations on the funding for FY26. So appreciate your feedback today so we can get to July. So on this chart, what we're showing is a total requests. A total of $327 million was requested in capital projects. We are recommending funding 40%, so a good amount. Last year, our budget was $74 million. The year before, it was $115. So this is one of the highest capital recommendations that we're doing, and we still have $194 million unfunded.
And just to add on to that, it's actually, I looked, it's the highest, this would be the highest capital program we've had since 2016, back when part of the original appropriation budget included the big convention center project. So it made over $1 billion budget just because of that. So this is the highest capital program that we'll be recommending over the last decade.
We're seeing it now, but I'd like to understand a few things. Obviously, the $122 million is to fix the hotspots, right? That's the hotspot flooding program, correct?
That's included, but it's not just the flooding program, but it's the water, sewer, stormwater projects.
Okay, and the capital pay-as-you-go are all our other capital projects that have a gap, correct?
No, so capital pay as you go it's like the general fund version of on the capital side. It's the funding source that pays for all our projects that don't have a specific funding source. So like parking projects have their own funds, water and sewer, of course, convention centers. So those have their own funding sources. Pay as you go is like the catch-all for every project that doesn't have a funding source.
So that's just general maintenance, you mean?
It would be new assets.
Replacing
So that would be
air conditioning units?
No,
or
that would be the
replacing-
one listed as capital replacement, or CRR. The PAYGO, or capital pay-as-you-go, is the most flexible funding source the city has. It comes out of the general fund millage rate specific, and it can be used either for things along those lines when the CRR doesn't have enough funds, but it's a critical capital replacement, or it would cover a completely new thing at the end of the day.
And the resort tax quality of life capital, what is that?
The resort tax quality of life, those are going to
capitals,
capture elements that are in resort tax eligible areas of the city. We do go into the specifics of what the specific projects. There's dollars that are appropriated in North Beach, South Beach, Mid Beach. The percentages are
10% in each area.
Is that all in here?
yes.
Yes, all the projects we're recommending are here. As we go through those slides, we'll actually do a little overview of the source of the funds and what we can use it for.
Right.
And I just have one other question. Like the 42 million that was requested for parking, for example, and then you recommend 35 million, and then you say 25 million is going to the 7 Second Street garage. Is that coming out, that's coming out of that parking fund, or that's coming out of the capital pay-as-you-go?
No, it's not. None of it's coming out of the pay-as-you-go fund, and we have the detail on every single capital project that we are recommending funding for, and we're going to go
And
through
then
that
one more
next.
thing, the convention center that we just redid, 14,440. What is that?
We also have slides that detail the dozen or 2 dozen projects so we have all that detail for you.
And what about the contractor who completed that project? Isn't he responsible on some level for that $14 million? Because
No.
when you do a construction project and then things are faulty, what? It is?
Yeah, we have multiple slides going into the depths of every single convention center related project that
Okay.
we can discuss.
It wasn't done at the time that the convention center was renovated. It's the roof, it's different. I have a very quick question, quick. Listen.
Life is relative.
Listen, you, Chairman, you. So the detail is awesome. I really appreciate it. We've got all kinds of things annotated. The one thing I would have loved to have seen, you know, it's a sort function of some sort, to, no pun intended, is to see how much is going to like sewer and how much is going to stormwater, regardless of the funding source, of what, regardless of PAYGO or what the source is, of what is unfunded that is potentially should be funded. What of that is stormwater and sewer?
We have that in the slides. When we get to,
But
there's
the
a
total
water and
aggregate.
sewer, that would be the $93 million, the very first line.
Oh, staring at me right in the face. Okay, and how much of that 93 is critical to help with the flooding that we have here?
We'll discuss that more when we get to, if that's okay, when we get to the stormwater section of the presentation.
Of that 93 million, how much of that would be taken care of by a bond based on increased rates?
When we get around to addressing those issues, it would be expected the entire unfunded amount should be covered by any kind of rate adjustment and thus future bond issuance.
Thank you.
And I would just add, the details that you're asking for are actually in the pullout sheet that you're looking at. Page 15 has a total unfunded water and sewer, and page 16 has the stormwater.
Right. And we'll talk a little bit about that.
And one quick thing before we move on, and then I'll let you move on. That $122 million in utilities, that is just what is requested for this year. So in fact, when we look at our long-term infrastructure and resiliency, preparing for climate change, preparing for flooding, we actually have unfunded critical infrastructure needs of over $1 billion. So this $122.5 million is actually what's just being requested for this year.
Yes, Chair, and I think to your point, the 27 request for water and sewer is $116.3 million, and the stormwater is $123.7 million. So when we're sitting here next year, anything that's unfunded would roll into that plus that amount. So yes, you are correct, Chair, I know we had spoken about that. The 27 number is also quite substantial.
What concerns me the most is the capital renewal and replacement, because those are roofs that aren't working, flooring that needs to be replaced, AC units that are old. And I mean, they're recommending 25 million and we're like not even at 20%. That should really be funded because those are mostly critical needs, aren't they? I don't see that it's overwhelming when it's itemized, but renewal and replacement, shouldn't that be prioritized too? Because if you allow that to you know, just continue, I mean, it's just gonna get worse and worse. How can we only recommend 4.5 million out of 25 million requested, and were the requests significant requests? Because it's you know, to me, that's disturbing, that $20 million of our renewal and replacement is not being renewed and replaced, and I wanna understand what exactly that is, and that's why the city, sometimes our facilities look kind of shabby. I mean, we want our facilities to shine, and, you know, we can't just ignore renewal and replacement.
Well, that'll be up to us. Essentially, I was working with Parks and Rec. The PTA at South Point Elementary has been reaching out over the past few weeks, and the basketball court there that the community actually uses, so it's actually open to the public after hours, is in shambles. And John, this isn't throwing you under the bus, this is just relaying information. You're just kind of putting the information in our court. It says, yeah, the courts are in very poor condition and they'll actually need a complete rebuild. But we don't have funding, and it's $264,000, and it's earmarked for 2028, right? I mean, who knows what happens in 2028, but as we go through these next slides, it's not the staff that's deciding on the priorities of these projects, it's going to be us, and we're going to see some very, very big ticket items. We have a finite pie, right? We don't have an infinite pie, and I think a lot of times we sit up here, especially with some of these capital requests, and we act as if we do. Right, so if you take $13 million or $6 million for one project, that means it's not allocated somewhere else. And as we see, where it's not being allocated is in some of those replace and renew. So if we want to prioritize that, that's not their decision. That's going to be our decision, and we can certainly discuss that.
The question is, if we can't renew and replace what we already have, and by the way, when I see this, I'm always frustrated. I'm looking at the director of facilities management because it's not his fault. He doesn't have the money to do what he knows needs to get done. That to me is disturbing, especially when we're talking about allocating. Look, I know that we need a parking garage in North Beach, but to say that we're going to take $25 million when we're not even renewing and replacing what we have to is somewhat irresponsible. We need to meet with them. You've met with him, and because this is coming. Is it facilities management that's giving you renewal and replacement, or is it individual directors who are saying, look, in Parks and Rec at the Scott Rakow, we have X that needs to be fixed, and we're just saying, okay, we're just gonna put a little Band-Aid on it and leave it like that. If we can't fix and renew and replace and paint and make it look beautiful what we have, how can we continue to build new? And this also brings about, that to me is disturbing. And in the past, what have we done? Has it always been like this? Has renewal and replacement always been at 20%?
So if I could
Of request?
try to answer some of this. On the capital renewal and replacement projects, if you look through them, a majority of those are projects that are recommended that come from the Facilities Management Department. We do work very closely with the Facilities Management Department to prioritize the top priorities. The budget that is presented here does, I believe, we do fund at least partially or fully, I think, every one of their top priorities they have. There's a few other ones that when July 1st numbers come out, some additional CR dollars or PAYGO dollars may become available, and we will try to make a recommendation when we come to the July 11th and do the capital update on trying to fund some of those elements. Another thing to note is that this comes from a dedicated millage service. This commission increased it last year when we had a slight decrease in the millage due to the increase in valuations related to the GO bond debt service, and that could be another opportunity that we will discuss in July. The other thing to note is the millage specific for CRR, this commission has increased, has quadrupled in the past 4 years. So if you go back 4 years, it was like I'm using round numbers here, 0.02 mils, and now it's 0.8 and change mils. So the commissions have been hearing, these issues and have been working towards addressing it. And I think we continue to put programs and policies in place to try to continue to address this. Yeah.
Can I ask facilities management a few questions just to find out?
Sure.
What's the 25
I don't know if you want to wait till
Come on, I don't mean to put you on the hot seat,
Okay.
but I think we need to know before we make these allocations, because if we don't know, we are. Because I don't see any, you recently started, so you've been doing an assessment of all of our properties, correct? And in your opinion, and given the portfolio that you've had and seen, is this 20% adequate?
Well, currently, right now, we have about $60 million of deferred maintenance. So I think I've worked with Jason and Eric, and we're putting together a plan, and I presented it to Eric, and we'll have conversations with Jason as well on how we can tackle this over the next 3 to 5 years.
So we have 60 million in deferred maintenance, and we requested 25 million, and of the 25 million, we roughly got 20%. Is it less than 20%? So what will the plan be? Because if you have 60 million right now and you're only funding 20% this year, then by next year, that 60 million is going to grow to 65 million. How can we recommend the $25 million additional for that garage when you have $60 million in unfunded on what we currently have? And we need to heed this because you have a professional that we paid that came in, that assessed all of our properties and told us that we have $60 million. This is like broken toilets and plumbing and doors that are unpainted and windows that need to be replaced. I mean, this is the face of the city.
Okay, so
if I could answer that through the chair. So the city of Miami Beach has many different sources of funding. We're very lucky to be able to have the many different sources of funding that we have. However, a lot of those sources are dedicated to a specific use. We can't tap into enterprise funds that are earmarked for water and sewer improvements and upgrades and turn that around and use that on bathrooms in City Hall or on the Scott Rakow Youth Center. We also, the 25 million you've mentioned on several occasions is parking funds, which is also an enterprise fund, which isn't something we can tap into to then do, again, bathrooms or the youth centers. We have these CR&R lists, and Ron has been a great partner in coming up with, we've got to come up with a plan long-term for how we're going to address this CR&R deficit. And I think that, we've consistently been mentioning that we're growing, unfortunately, our capital needs on a daily, monthly, yearly basis, and we haven't been able to keep up with those needs, particularly on the CR&R and the PAYGO, which is why the dedicated millages are so important. But Commissioner, I agree with you. We need to do more to maintain our current facilities, but unfortunately, we have to do it within the constraints of the funding that we have.
Sure.
The increases, and I don't see this here, but for our next hearing, could we please have an increase in operational funding? I requested it, I know, late in the game, but if you look at how we've grown in recurring operating expenses.
That'll be July 11th.
Yeah, we need to see that trend so that we can then see how did we get to 60 million in deficit? Because you can't keep ignoring renewal and replacement and adding operating funds when we have a lot of people but no money for them to get their job done, and then we get frustrated with the people and we're saying, why isn't your job getting done? And they're saying, well, our needs are unfunded. So you got people but nothing for them to work with to get the job done. That's a problem. So are you recommending that we somehow cut operational to get to where we can? You're going to have to. We have no choice. And we can't build our way out of this.
So it's not a matter of building our way out of it. It's about coming up with a long-term plan, a 5-year capital renewal and replacement plan that ultimately we're going to have to commit that we're going to fund to start bringing down the gap as opposed to increasing the gap.
But but you're going to have to cut operational funds, and that's the issue. But I don't know where we cut from because we don't have the trends of where we've really increased operational. So if we can't see that, we don't understand what we need to cut so that we're not growing this massive capital deficit, which, by the way, we're funding at 33% this year. They requested 300. Can you go back to the capital slide again, please? Because I just want all of us to look at this. 327, we're only funding 133. And then can you go back to the very first slide, please? Going. Because I want to show you my big worry.
This is the first slide.
Yeah, go to the other. I would like to see the first slide where you show our property tax increases year over year, our property tax increase values, because I'd like to go back to 2010 so that we can kind of look and I can show you the trend. Can you go back to that first?
We've seen it.
Yeah, so in 2010, we got a 15% decrease, okay? And then what would happen? Okay.
Of course, we've been
Jason.
talking about this since last year.
Yeah.
We can't,
we went into this in depth
continue
at the
to
retreat.
expect
But how can,
double-digit increases.
So we have to say right now that in this new budget going forward, we cannot increase operating expenses by one single penny moving forward. And not only that, but where can we cut? And that's what we kind of need this presentation to be about, is where can we cut? How much is the debt service over time going to increase? Because we're not talking about that, and we keep drawing on debt service. Okay, so debt service is going to increase. How is this going to impact our residents? We don't have any of those projections at all. And so I'm just telling you right now that I'm concerned, and if we don't see an increase in the operating at this point, I'm going to vote against this because I don't think it's responsible. I think you need to allocate more to capital. It's because it's unacceptable. At least complete the renewal and replacement, which is only 25 million out of 60.
Well, once we get to
30%.
once we get to the projects,
It's only
we'll
the
see where
requesting-
we're prioritizing.
he's saying 60 million, so you're requesting 5 million out of 60. That's what we're funding.
Jason, let's move on
10%.
to the items and get into where our capital is being allocated.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, we will be addressing, again, this is one is about capital, but we will be having a capital update and a full operating balanced budget recommendation at the July 11th as we still compile everything. So we'll go back here. So we're going to talk a little bit about budget allocations. How do we allocate? Why do we pick some projects and not other projects? So first we fund our highest priority CRR and PAYGO. Although there is a list of many important projects that need funding, whether they're real replacement or new projects, we do work with the departments to ensure that the most important needs are done. And we look at, life safety, things like that, preservation of assets over, let's say remodels and things like that. So we do try to address those, and we do think we do a good job on that concept. Now, next, we also fund budget gaps in existing projects. So we want to finish projects that we've started. So you will see projects on the big list that we are not recommending starting because, again, we want to fund projects that we've already started. Next would be matching funds for eligible grants. So we have a number of capital projects that have grants that match to it. So when we know that we've applied for a grant, we have to appropriate dollars for the match. And we're going to talk about one or two of those coming up in the different programs. We'll highlight those. And then we want to use, older available bond dollars as we have earned interest. And then finally, really, the enterprise funds, which kind of live on their own, and legally they have to utilize and fund themselves. They're individual businesses, and that's your parking, your water and sewer and stormwater, and then if transportation had anything available. And then just talking a little bit about strategy. So as we've discussed before, the commission has set aside a policy that the golf courses, which have finally over the past couple of years begun to generate a profit, that the golf courses renovation projects, of which there are many millions of dollars in golf course needed projects, the golf money is staying with all the golf courses. And the second one I really want to highlight, and this goes to a little bit of the conversation was earlier, is what are we doing to address that funding, capital funding deficit? And one thing that this commission put in place this fiscal year in 25, and we're recommending to continue that in 26, is to utilize a percentage of the general fund interest income. We started in 25 at 25%. This would increase it to 30%. We'll increase it every year thereafter by 5% to 100% of the general fund interest income is going to capital projects. This year we allocated it to specific capital PAYGO dollar projects that needed. Next year we'll look at CRR, but this is a $2.4 million infusion that didn't exist a few years ago. So that is a very good policy, I believe.
Can I ask, what was the total interest that you got off of the general fund that you infused?
2.4. Oh, well, 2.4 million is the 30%.
It was 8 million projected.
8 million.
Right.
Okay.
And that, as we discussed in that policy, it's an extraordinarily variable revenue source because interest rates, which we have no control over, can increase and decrease at a whim's notice. And we wanted to ensure that we had long-term financial sustainability from that perspective, so we insulated ourselves from that variable aspect. We don't want to all of a sudden have a $7 million budget deficit just because interest rates plummeted. So by allocating this capital, that's really, I think, a good, smart strategy the commission endorsed this year.
Just one more question. What were we doing with that before? It was just going into the general fund?
Yeah, that's what it's just another funding source for the general fund is the earning interest on the cash that you have. So the next two slides just kind of list out some of the capital projects that specifically the commission has requested us to try to locate funding for. And what we have listed here are about, in the two slides together, around $78 million. But we are funding 55% dollar-wise. So only 3 that are listed that we were able to locate money for. We did get a majority of the dollars. So the ones I want to highlight, and we're kind of touched on earlier, the 72nd Street Community Complex, almost all of those dollars are from the parking department fund, which we used only for parking. This is programmed dollars that were always programmed to complete that total project cost, plus the additional $4.5 million the commission endorsed to add the extra layer of parking at that facility, with a little bit of balance coming from quality of life. Fire station number 1, taking up 13 $0.8 million. We did locate those dollars. That was the number one priority listed by the commission at the November 24 budget amendment closeout meeting that we had. And then the last one that we were able to locate funding for is the 41st Street corridor. This is a GO bond funded project based on commission endorsed scope changes and adjustments coming from the community. Additional funding was needed, $4.5 million, of which almost all of it will be coming from the Mid-Beach Quality of Life, which we will talk a bit more about. And then this next one just lists, again, a few more projects that the commission had hoped for us to locate dollars for. Again, July 1st, we will hopefully have some additional dollars that may become available, and we will see if, when we do our capital update on July 11th, if we're able to locate any dollars to fund those again, or additional of CRR projects that may be critical from the facilities department perspective.
And Jason, I'd just like to concentrate on those last two slides. So these are just the commission-driven project requests. A lot of things in here, and this is big ticket, and is dominated by three different things.
Correct.
Right? So when we talk about we have a finite pie, and we've talked about this last year, we talked about it a year and a half ago. If we make decisions like saying, well, we're moving the fire station, that's $14 million. $14 million that doesn't go to other capital projects or to maintenance and repairs and requests, and the same thing for, all of these items that we decide to take on. These are very big ticket, and we don't just have an infinite pot, right? So where $1 goes, it has to come from somewhere else. That's just one example. There's others up there as well.
Well, can I say one thing? I mean, if the 25 million comes out of the parking fund to complete that project, that's fine. What is the total cost of that garage at this point?
Well, it's not a garage, but the total project is 101.7. Plus the 4.5
Plus the
that we
4.5
added.
you added, right.
We did a lot of improvements to the existing fire station as is, correct, Digna? I think we painted, didn't we?
I think there were some minor,
do the mold remediation, and we fixed it. If we had to if you had to allocate that 13.8 million to renewal and replacement to at least make the 20% to at least try to complete the $25 million, the 30% of the 60 million that we need to do, and put that off and just allocate a small amount to whatever remediation they need in their current house right now. That way you're taking care of at least a minimum of AC and toilets
Through
that
the
don't
chair.
work and door handles that don't work.
Commissioner Vaughn.
I am beside myself hearing this conversation about let me finish my thought, please, about hearing this conversation about the fire station. We worked collectively as a commission with staff, with Chief Fernandez, with Chief Abello, with David Martinez, to make sure that we found a solution that was equitable, that did not harm the park, which it is not, coming an inch near the track. It is going to be beautiful. We are going to provide our entire city with a state-of-the-art fire station that is Category 5 storm rated. And if anyone thinks we're not getting worse weather and we are so overdue for a hurricane, we are delusional. We found the money. We found the money last year. And we, as a commission, unanimously voted to protect that money so that we did not delay this for 1 second longer. And for us to reopen this conversation, I find incredibly irresponsible, wildly irresponsible. I don't disagree with your concerns. I share them, that we need to find money to make sure that it goes as far as possible. I would suggest, perhaps, not taking away from a critical public safety need in one of our most densely populated parts of the city with the highest of high buildings where we need state-of-the-art fire equipment. Perhaps we leave that alone since we found that money and have been husbanding it for a year so that it is ready to go on day one. And perhaps what we can do is, instead of taking $6.5 million to convert a home into a marine science museum, which is a lovely thing to do, but it's not $6,500. It's $6.5 million. We have the log cabin, which is coming up next year for being rebuilt in the same area. It is a smaller footprint, but this is not just a question of $6.5 million to prepare the property and turn it into a museum. Also, recurring costs. Who's going to run it? Who's going to maintain it? Who's going to staff it? Who's going to feed the animals? Who's going to buy the food for the animals? That's not even contemplated in this budget. So my suggestion is, why don't we look at things that are discretionary, that are not public safety, that we have not been sitting on the money, carefully protecting it for a year to make sure that our residents, God forbid, need fire and rescue services, are not having to deal with people who are dealing with mold and old equipment because new equipment, bigger equipment can't fit in there. I can't even believe we're having this conversation. And it's not that I don't agree that we need to find ways to take money and spread it further, but not from this project, for God's sake. Please.
Commissioner.
Through the chair, if it's possible, it's Commissioner Suarez.
Wait, can I just say one thing, Commissioner Suarez, before you jump in? If you look,
Sure.
that marine thing wasn't even funded. It's not even on, I mean, it's on the table, but it's not on the table. We're so far from that right now, we can't even get to fixing our toilets. So that's like
I
a
was
super
using
luxury.
it just as an example from this
I
list.
I understand, but like, that's not even funded. There's 3 things funded. And it also begs the question of the fact that, we have these GeoBond projects and we're using the same scope and scale, and then we come back and we need to add 30%, 25%, and that's a problem too, because we're taking that money out of our general fund to complete GeoBond projects. So the GeoBond committee needs to look at these projects moving forward and say, here's what we funded. We don't have that money anymore. What can we do within the budget that we have? And we're not doing that. We're just...
Well, that's fine, but we can't absolve ourselves from that.
No, we're not.
I know, hold on, please. If you look at why a lot of these projects have such a significant amount of cost overrun, it's because we've sat here and delayed them for years and years and years. When was the GeoBond approved?
2018.
Why hasn't the 72nd Street garage gone forward? Largely because of all the changes the commission has made over the years, right? The fire station, why hasn't that moved forward? Largely because of all the changes that the commission has sat here and bandied about, different locations, different projects. Those have real life consequences, those delays. And the same thing with the not the Byron Corral, the Jackie Gleason, right? We're sitting here changing the scope, changing what it's going to be. As we sit here and delay because of changes, a lot of times they lead to very significant cost overruns, right? We need extra money for the 72nd Street because we've delayed for years implementing that project. Same thing with the fire station. It's not about the merits of a new fire station. That was in the GeoBond, is that correct?
Yes.
Right?
Correct.
And we also had a state grant, but that $14 million is the result of us making changes to the scope and location of that project. And that's the reason for a lot of these cost overruns for a lot of these projects. And we're going to continue to see that as we make changes and, kick that can further down the road. Commissioner Suarez, I know you wanted to chime in.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The last time I heard about the fire station, I vividly remember a slide where the fire station wall was, I think, 4 or 5 feet from the track. And I went on the record and I said, if this is not going to change, I'm going to have a big problem with that location. I still think we need to see an updated design and rendering, because if it's 5 feet from the edge of the track, I think that's going to be a problem. And we have yet to see that. So I don't necessarily know if that is a done deal. Another thing is the Marine Science Center. If I remember correctly, it was the building department, and Jason, maybe you can chime in, but it was the building department that purchased it because we had extra funds in the building department. There's no way to move those funds over to to say that we own it in the general fund now? It just seems like, we're all one city. Does it matter which fund purchased the Marine Science Center?
Commissioner, to answer your question, yes, the commission I think over about a year ago, took the recommendation to utilize building department funds for the building department to acquire that building, to renovate it and turn it into a North Beach kind of mini government center up there, focused on permitting and parking and things along those lines. But no, unfortunately, legally, you have to use building department funds specifically on building department functions. That's based on state law. So no, if the building department is going to continue to own that building, it would need to be utilized in its original commission-approved intended usage.
And we can't, even by resolution, transfer those funds from the building department to the general fund or the asset to the general fund?
No.
Can I say something?
Commissioner Bott and then Commissioner Rosen Gonzalez.
Yes, but we could purchase it for $1. I mean, or $100. Why not?
Can we do that, Jason?
Well, I don't see why not. I would like a legal opinion on that.
So I don't believe that that's consistent with state law. I don't think that you could,
But besides that, no, I'm just
I just don't
Let's see
think
what
that you could
Ricardo,
discount.
what can we do?
No, the funds do need to be replaced to the building department. As I understand, this was an issue several years ago. The Inspector General came down on the city for certain software that was purchased using building department funds that shouldn't have been. And so we need to be very careful in this area.
Commissioner Bott.
David Martinez, would you come up and talk about the fire station for a quick second? Please.
Good morning.
Good morning. And hi, it's the Davids in stereo. So because it hasn't come back to the commission, not everybody knows, but the design has changed quite significantly. Could you talk about how far away it is from the track, and some of the concerns that my colleagues have about impinging on the functionality of Flamingo Park?
Sure, Commissioner. I'll let David give you all the details, David Gomez, but I will tell you that the design is quite different than what was at the South Shore Community Center site. The distance is greater than 5 feet. We expect to be able to have something that would be ready for the public to view probably as early July, as they are now fine-tuning what the product that they have. But I'll let David give some more additional detail.
Good morning, Commissioner. David Gomez, Director of Capital Improvements. David is correct. The design has changed considerably. If you will recall, the driving factor and the size of the fire station itself is the equipment bay. And what we've done is we've rearranged the parking on the ground floor so that we can move that footprint away from the track, probably 15 feet, maybe more.
Which is further away than the fence is currently.
Correct. I believe the fence now is about 3 feet from the track.
So in fact, this fire station will actually give people more space around the track than they have currently.
I believe the fence would remain in place so that it would be the same condition.
Okay.
Now, the second floor where the equipment bay is does get a little closer, but never more than the 5 feet we had originally.
Okay, thank you.
Well, that's really good to know.
And you can call on Commissioner Fernandez. And then add him as a panelist.
Chair, is he waiting to speak or we get back to the PowerPoint?
Commissioner Fernandez. Ralph, can we recognize Commissioner Fernandez?
PJ, I don't have the power to do that.
Promoting him right now.
And we're going to promote him. Let's take him down.
So finally, we find out
Good morning.
who wields all the power.
Morning.
Good morning,
Good
Commissioner.
morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for recognizing me, and I apologize for not being able to be there in person. I'm attending a graduation of a dear Miami Beach resident that's graduating from residency. But I wanted to speak on the issue of the 7605 house and the funding for that. I've been in communications with our CFO, with our city manager's office about the surpluses that we have in the current fiscal year. And seeing, Jason, would it be possible at the end of this fiscal year, using surplus dollars that we have, just counting on the projection of the projections? I mean, we look at quarter two, I think we have a $4 million surplus. And I think as we move through the fiscal year, it could be anticipated that we will have a surplus at the end of the year. Could those funds be used to buy back the property from the enterprise fund in the current fiscal year?
Yes, Commissioner, we did have that discussion, and in November of '25, when we have a special meeting just to handle, as we always do every year, the rollover amount and the surplus, which by commission policy goes towards capital projects. If at that time we discern that there's a sufficient surplus generated from the general fund, the commission could at that time, instead of it being rolled into the capital program for '27, could give direction there at the November '25 meeting to direct it to the specific project or any other particular capital project. There's a lot of discussion on CR, but yes, there might be an opportunity.
And as we discussed, I have my office working on a resolution to bring at the upcoming meeting. I don't want us to necessarily wait till the end of the year. I want to make sure that we start putting aside those funds for this purpose, because anything could happen between now and November where, the funds then get redirected somewhere else. So I just want to make sure that we do move forward with that resolution to start saying that these excess dollars from the current fiscal year, we can designate them to bring the property into the domain of the general fund. And anyone that wants to join me as a prime sponsor of that resolution, any of my colleagues, everything that we do it in unity for the taxpayers of the city, and I'm happy to collaborate with anyone that wants to join me in that effort.
So, the Chair, back to the presentation, so we can bring the PowerPoint back up?
All right, next slide. So we're going to go into the individual projects that we're recommending. The first funding is a capital renewal and replacement that we spend quite a bit of time talking about. There is a dedicated millage rate, as we mentioned before, and that's projected to bring in $4.4 million in FY26. We're recommending appropriating every penny that we project to earn. We also had about $290,000 left over from last year. That still leaves, as we discussed, $20.6 million of unfunded projects. Again, any excess money we have at the end of '25, we could actually fund some more of these projects as well.
So I'll talk on the next two slides about some of the specific recommended uses of this $4.5 million. You're going to see a theme, which is recertifications, building recertifications, from the Historic City Hall recertification, which is a 90-year recertification, and that's been going on for a number of years, funding towards that. The PAL building, some other citywide buildings, fire alarm replacement, fire station roof replacement, chiller repairs, replacing exhaust systems at our fire stations are some of the projects that are important. And what I want to point out here is the last one is Historic City Hall energy efficiency windows. It's partially funded through here with a little in another one, but this totals $1 million recommendation towards this, but we're matching it to a $3 million grant that the commission will be endorsing for us to be submitting. So if I can get $3 million, I'll try to find $1 million every day of the week. And we will, hearing the commission, we're excited about that, hearing, the interest in CRR, because as we talked about, it's usually not the sexiest of projects, right? The new playgrounds, new this, new that, are the, sometimes the more exciting photo op things and things along those lines. But capital replacement are the heart of what we do, and I think that's exciting to hear. We will look at those opportunities as dollars become available through this budget process.
Yeah, and Mr. CFO, we live in an old city and we pride ourselves on our historic charm, but that comes at a cost. These are expensive to maintain. Just that historic city hall that serves as kind of a clerical place, and we also have the O Cinema there. There's substantial costs that go into maintaining that.
Correct.
Can I just say something on that slide? Can you go back? The only reason we allocated anything to renewal and replacement at all is because we were literally forced to. They're all recertifications that we have to do. So what that says to me is that we were forced by law to finally invest something in renewal and replacement. But what does that mean? It means we're doing the bare minimum. Thank goodness you added in the windows, because otherwise we would have done the concrete work and not replaced the windows. Nobody does that. So that is very smart to at least add in the windows to that construction project. And frankly, when I go by that one facility that we're finally working on and beautifying, I say to myself, it is so nice to see that we're taking care of our properties. But that 4.5 million is such bare bones only because we were forced to do the recertification. This is a prime example of when you walk into a city facility and it doesn't look so great, it's because we're showing that we don't care. We don't care about taking care of our facilities. And that's what we have to kind of look at the next time we say, hey, let's put a playground here. Or, you know, I mean, it's true what he's just saying right now, is that we're doing a lot of like high profile fun stuff, but we're not taking care of anything over and beyond what we were forced to. The only thing that I see here that is not, and the police said the exterior waterproofing and painting, that's the only thing that has nothing to do with the recertification. Can you go back one slide? Or does that have to do with the recertification?
If I can, one of the things that this is as a long-term condo owner and condo board member is one of the most important things that you can do for a structure is to ensure your waterproofing, your painting are done, because that is the skin of your building, and that's going to protect your concrete, it's going to protect your rebar. So it's actually kind of under the radar, but it's actually extraordinarily important to do that. And we do work very closely with the facilities department. We're very excited that Ron's on board. He's newer. We have a meeting next week to talk about, you know, a multi-year plan on this. This is not something we're going to solve overnight in 1 year. This commission and previous commissions have worked towards this. This millage was 2005?
Yes.
Yeah, so this village started back in 2005. Before that, it competed with everything. It competed with office supplies and new park programs and things like that, to where a commission 20 years ago said, let's dedicate some millage specifically to this. And like I said, this commission over the past 4 years has quadrupled the dedicated funding towards that, going in the right direction. And I think, you know, we'll continue that. And I think, you know, working with the city manager, we're all about that as well, I'm an ex-engineer, he's still an engineer, but we love talking about infrastructure, and we love dedicating those dollars, and we're hearing it loud and clear. And when we have available dollars, we will definitely see about allocating those. So thank you.
And Jason, where do things like road replacement, road resurfacing, where do they fall?
Right now, a lot of that road resurfacing is covered under the general obligation bond. There was a large chunk of money.
Which is awful. Awful. Yeah, you and I have long discussions about this.
And I've had discussions.
We're getting on a better track, but that is absolutely awful.
We'll I don't want to highlight anything, but we'll talk a little bit about that at the July 11th one. But don't want to put anything out there yet. But we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So the capital pay-go.
Right, so this also has a dedicated millage that we instituted back in 2019. The next slide, we are projected to collect $5.2 million in FY26. You see, we have a total request of $80 billion. We're recommending 23.2. The reason we're able to recommend so much is that, as we mentioned before, $11.8 million were set aside at the end of FY24. We're transferring that over for the Fire Station 1 project, and then the two recommendations we made to transfer money from the golf courses, specifically for golf course projects and also interest income, to PAYGO also came in here to help us fund 23.2 off the request.
Right, so if I could just, just to highlight, where do we get capital dollars from the PAYGO CR, right? You have the CR and the PAYGO millages, so those are dedicated capital dollars coming in to our general fund. The other one that we've added was the interest income. So that's the $2.4 million that will grow hopefully in the coming years. That's your other one. And the other primary source of that is the general fund surplus. So when the surplus in November, we close out the initial closeout of the books happens, we generate a general fund surplus, unspent dollars typically. And those are by commission policy to go in the capital reserve. We have the comprehensive financial policy that I've worked on with our FERC chair, which will be going to BEC and eventually end up back in commission in a couple of months, recommends they'll allow us some flexibility use for CRR or PAYGO. So that's where a big infusion, that's often where $5–10 million are coming into that. And where that surplus get decreases is during the fiscal year when we have budget amendments and things like that. That's where that money is technically coming from. So you're taking, as you have budget amendments during the year, we're going to take from the capital dollars from the next program. So that's always something to keep in mind when we're going down that basis. But I want to get into the specific capital projects that we're recommending over the next two slides for the PAYGO. So a couple of the ones that are here is a grant fund match, 1.5 million for the police department flood mitigation improvements in their garage. We think that's important. Some facade improvements at one of the golf courses. We have the roof parapet painting and repairs. Bonded aggregate, that is the along the sidewalks when you're walking and around the trees. That's to stop and mitigate tripping hazards. So that's actually kind of a life safety and a risk mitigation program from the city. Bridges, I think every year there's usually a $600,000 allocation towards repairing bridges that the city is responsible for, and that's something that was one of the highest priorities. We don't want to be in a situation like the city was many years ago where we had to shut down a bridge temporarily because there were outstanding deficient repairs that had to be completed. And then I want to highlight a couple of things here. One is the West Avenue Phase 3. It's split funded. It's got grant matches to it. This $531,000 is a partial funding for the request. There's around $3.5 million short on this neighborhood improvement project. It's just a reminder to everyone at home, our neighborhood improvement projects get three funding sources: stormwater and water and sewer are the main ones, and then the above ground portion, that's the sidewalk replacements, asphalt, and landscaping, that comes usually through a PAYGO program.
But
so,
the overall West Avenue Phase 3 still has about a $10 million unfunded gap, correct?
Yes, I believe that there is another piece of this that still has to be found.
And the Baywalk as well, while we have an allocation here, has a $25 million unfunded gap.
That is correct. Well, it's not completely 25 because we still have the general obligation bond funds, as well as this piece of it, but yes, there is a gap.
Was somebody trying to chime in, maybe Commissioner Fernandez or Suarez?
Yes, I just had a question. I just want to make sure I'm reading this right. So project 157, flood mitigation at a parking garage is $1.5 million.
yes. This is part of the Miami Beach Police Department facility.
I have to say that I have issues when we have neighborhoods that are lacking funding. Neighborhoods that are lacking funding, like we were just hearing on West Avenue Phase 3. You know, we're trying to get to $3 million for a grant, is that correct?
Yeah, there's a grant attached to that.
Yeah, so we actually applied for a $1.5 million grant. So this is the match if we receive the grant.
So that's, again.
I just feel we have capital needs that are more directly tied into the neighborhoods of the residents that we serve, directly related to resiliency and flooding, where, you know, we can look for the $1.5 million because, you know, I understand there's an issue with water that goes into the garage at the police station on the ground floor, but I think they're taking care of that with pumps. I rather put this money where our taxpayers actually live and address the issues in our neighborhoods where we have projects that are still unfunded. And once we take care of those projects, and once we have other funding sources, well, then we go inside and we look and do like a garage that is not even open to the public. It's a limited garage. Then we go in and focus on that. Respectfully, to the police department, I believe that this $1.5 million is more responsibly used where we have flooding in neighborhoods going into.
If I could respond a little bit about that. So this, just so you know, this is not on the garages, this is the employee side of it, so it's not open to the public, which is why, you know, parking funds would not be available for it. And the other is that the neighborhood, the hotspot projects, neighborhood improvement project, everything, those are funded through the stormwater fund, which we will get to. So those have actual dedicated funding sources specific to that. These are dollars that would be going to, city-owned facilities specifically.
Listen, Commissioner Fernandez, I think, struck on some pretty good points, right? It pains me when I get a text message that we can't repave a basketball court for children until 2028 at a cost of $200,000, right? Or residents in Sunset Isle put together their own plans to have minor park improvements. You struck a chord with me there, Commissioner. So, continue on.
Okay, thank you.
It's just heartbreaking when our residents are asking us for improvements, and this issue is being addressed.
Through the chair, I'd also like to chime in.
The problem is being addressed.
Can I ask a quick question?
Commissioner Suarez and then Commissioner Bott. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, look, this is a great discussion. I think we all recognize that, we want certain needs fulfilled and paid for. And I think it's appropriate to put into perspective, especially becoming before the June 25th meeting, where we're going to be giving possibly zoning enhancements to developers. And we have a report that shows how much extra they are receiving because of our approvals. I think it's always prudent to say, okay, well, what will the city of Miami Beach benefit as well? And, what a greater way to show that, look, we have these capital improvements that need to be funded. If you're going to be requesting from us additional FAR, height, and intensity changes, you really need to share the burden on making Miami Beach upgraded and enhanced. So I really urge my colleagues to get the best deal possible from these projects that are before us, and it could be a win-win. So that's going to be a discussion that obviously we're going to have in June, but I just want to make sure that everyone has that in perspective and see that we're short on some of the most basic things for a city, and we certainly have a way to fund that with developers who are looking to make more profit. And so I think it should be a shared responsibility. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with you, Commissioner Suarez, and I think perhaps some things got a bit politicized with things like selling FAR, but I've long thought that we need as a city to better utilize P3s, public-private partnerships, because when we have this amount of unfunded critical capital needs, we cannot do that ourselves. And, perhaps I saw there's additional Baywalk funding. Perhaps that could actually be used. We could put that in as part of the public benefits package for the 1250 West deal, which would then free up $2.5 million for a park somewhere else, or to repave a basketball court, or for soccer fields for our children. Commissioner Bott.
Two questions. One, Jason, I thought the Miami Beach golf course projects were funded from the Miami Beach from the golf courses.
They are.
So the money was transferred from the operating budget to PAYGO.
Oh, okay, gotcha, thank you. And then, Chief Jones, can you just help us understand what this flood mitigation improvement project is? I don't want us to, these are short titles and most of them are self-explanatory, but if this is, their desks are floating around during a rainstorm, we should probably know that.
Sure, happy to as best I can. Wayne Jones, Chief Police Department. So whenever there is large amount of rain in the city, this is not something that's new to the police department. It's actually something that's been happening for years and years and years. Our garages get flooded. What that means is prior to that rain event occurring, it places a burden on folks that work in the organization, that take care of the building, to move all of our assets from that first floor up to higher floors or out of the police department altogether. What it means is police officers coming to work can't get into the garage because of the flooding. Facilities have been very good over the years by providing us pumps to get the water out as best they can. Oftentimes, the water's coming so hard and so fast, the pumps at some point become ineffective. I think facilities can probably add some color to this and explain the science behind what happens every time it rains. But the fact of the matter is, we're gonna have to fix it either now or later. In the meantime, if it's not fixed, we'll do as best we can, as we have been doing for many, many years.
So because this is a police department garage, not a public parking garage, we can't use our parking funds for this parking lot?
That's correct. So this is a general government facility. You know, I just spoke with Ron. This is, if you look at your program, was actually listed as the top on the PAYGO priority. So it is one of the very top projects from the facilities department for you know, keeping our assets safe. But that being said, and if I can, you know, if there's interest in other projects that aren't listed as funded as we go through here, you know, we always have opportunities. We're listing, we're taking notes. We will come back in July for the update on capital when we get into the operating. And there are some potential one-time dollars if there's something, again, on the list that we can fund. Now, if I can just add on, I think when we bring the presentation back up, thanks, Chief. It's something to the chair had said was related to the Bay Walk. So we have a $2.5 million request recommendation to utilize PAYGO funds to continue funding that project. It's partial. But I think, as the chair had mentioned, I know that there's something in works that may free up some of those dollars depending on how the June 25th meeting happens. And we're still working with the departments to understand the full funding to make sure that the Bay Walk does get completed. But if this opportunity does avail itself and the commission moves in that direction, we might be in a position to reallocate those dollars either into continuing to try to fund up the West Avenue Phase 3, which needs around $3.5 million, or if there's some other projects that specifically, the commission says these are important, and we can discuss those, if those dollars get freed up at the July 11th meeting. But I think we're hearing and we're making notes.
Thank you.
Okay.
I would feel more comfortable with that 1.5 million being put with West Avenue Phase 3. And Mr. Manager, in the future, where we have situations where, I mean, this is the first time I'm hearing where we have employees of the city, the most critical department in the city, the police department, not being able to show up because the flooding is so bad, where assets are having to be moved to different locations because of the flooding. I mean, that is something that we shouldn't be hearing about in a budget hearing. I mean, this is something that, if it is as serious as what has just been described to us, Mr. Manager, why aren't we being notified when our facilities are being damaged, when our workforce isn't able to get into the building, when the city's assets and tools are having to be mobilized to other locations? That's the type of stuff we need to be notified about, not at a budget hearing, but when it happens. So, I need to better understand these circumstances. But when I'm hearing that there's that West Avenue Phase 3 that I have in the past placed on the agenda as something that we want and that we need to prioritize funding for, I feel a challenge supporting that $1.5 million to a city facility where the problem is being addressed, I thought, when we have an area where the residents need this money in.
So, Commissioner, I was aware of the flooding that we have at the police facility. As the chief said, it has been going on for years. Obviously, we have a new facilities director who's come in and identified potential concerns, and we are trying to address all of them as quickly as we can. But I'm happy to discuss with you further if you have any questions or concerns.
If I could add on to that, if I may, this is not a new project. This goes into probably our category 2 of priority projects in the sense that it's a project that's already started. The commission appropriated $504,000 towards this project in a prior year, 24 or earlier. So this has been an ongoing project that has been under design and review for a couple of years. And it was determined that additional funds are to mitigate the main issue, which is a $3 million need. Again, if we can allocate 1.5 million to get 50 cents on the dollar basically project, that's why we went ahead and did it. So it's both grant funded and it's a project we've already appropriated and already started working on. So that's why this is really at one of the top of the list. But again, we will definitely hear this. We will definitely take all of this in consideration, and we will have more of an update when we come into the July 11th.
Is the police department flooding issue, is that a critical needs project?
It is considered a critical need from the facilities department perspective. It is not part of the stormwater program because that's not a stormwater mitigation like for the streets and such like that. This is a facilities project.
So it's not a critical needs project?
If you're using the term stormwater critical needs, it is not in the stormwater. It's not a stormwater project and wouldn't be eligible for that. This is the eligible funding source.
And is West Avenue Phase 3 a critical needs project?
No, West Avenue Phase 3 is not considered a critical need in the critical needs program. It's in the neighborhood improvement program. We'll talk a little bit more about West Avenue Phase 3 because, again, we talked about multiple funding sources. The stormwater, when we kind of talked about it a little bit early, but in the stormwater fund, when we get to that in a number of slides, we are fully funding the stormwater portion of it. The water and sewer portion is short, I think like $13 million. We'll talk a little bit about that, and then obviously that's something that hopefully we'll address in the next number of months going forward. So there's still some
I'm very confused that because my understanding was that West Avenue was a critical needs project under our capital, under our programs.
So Commissioner, if I could help maybe facilitate this discussion a little bit. The critical needs program, as referred to by our Public Works Department, is for quick wins that are in 20 locations that would ultimately dovetail with our neighborhood improvement program. The West Avenue project is part of the larger neighborhood improvement program where we've already completed one phase. We're undertaking phase 2, and then phase 3 would be the completion of the remaining segment.
Okay, so West Avenue is part of the neighborhood improvement program. That's what in part when the credit agencies look at our bond rating that they point to ratify our bond rating. Those are the ones that keep our credit high and all that. So West Avenue is one of those.
Yes. And if we're not specifically speaking of capital
Okay.
C,
It's
capital
a
N,
police
critical needs,
department
it is a
flooding-
critical need.
It's a police department flooding project. Is the police department flooding project part of the ones that the bond rating agencies use to keep our credit rating high?
No.
If I can, yes, in the perspective that anytime that you're allocating dollars to preserve and protect your assets, absolutely, from that concept. I don't think it's, it might be, I don't want to use a nomenclature thing back in here forth, because I know the stormwater critical needs program is related to our streets. This is a facility asset at the end of the day. But this is considered critical from the facilities department and from the police department's perspective. Again, the commission has already allocated over $500,000 towards this project in a prior year and has determined that the ultimate aspect through that design and planning out phases is that this additional $3 million is needed. We're very hopeful on the $1.5 million grant that is through the application process. We just need to match that $1.5 million. So we don't apply, if we don't have this $1.5 million, we'd obviously lose the match on the grant. So we think that this is a good use of those funding sources. But again, if I can, in July, we'll relook at, at any available dollars if there's projects that are not being shown in that list. We have some opportunities here. But we're going to go on to the resort tax quality of life.
Right, so the funding source for these projects are 1% resort tax revenues. We estimate we'll collect about $18 million, and $1.8 million will be allocated to South Beach, Mid Beach, and North Beach. And all the projects that we program here have to be resort tax tourist eligible projects.
Wow. Did I read that right? That 60% of our
Yes. 60% of the 1%.
resort taxes go towards the trolley system?
60% of 1%
Yeah.
on the room rent. So
So
that's
it's-
not the food and beverage, it's not the other 3%. It's
Right.
60% of 1%.
Which is
Wow.
$10.8 million.
Well,
Okay.
it's trolley system, and it's the transportation fund, so it funds other things such as the ITS system.
Right.
All the transportation department staff, it funds the transportation department, of which the trolley is one aspect of it.
Yeah, it's a major funding source for the transportation fund.
Yeah.
Right, so within the South Beach area, we are funding two 40-year and a 60-year certification project. We've been funding bollards citywide for several years. We funded about 2.7 the previous year, so this is the first allocation that we're making in South Beach. Normally, we have more requests in South Beach, and so this is the first time we've had enough money to put some bollards dollars specifically for South Beach. And then a lot of renewal and replacement projects as well in the South Beach area, lifeguard towers, repairs. And then in South Point, we have some projects. The splash pad needs some repairs for their equipment. And then there's also a pathway project at the South Point Park. And then here we have, you'll see a couple of items where we have a minus and a plus. We're just actually transferring money from one lighting project to another. You'll see it in 3 different slides. And then we also have funding for some landscaping in South Beach.
And then for the mid-beach, we are recommending the utilization of all the available funds that were generated this year to complete the funding on the 41st Street project. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, this was a commission-listed priority. There were commission-endorsed changes in scope and adjustments to that project, which generated additional need for dollars. And these are the dollars that we're able to locate. So we're excited about getting that project fully funded out. And then the North Beach area has a number of different projects. Again, the security bollard citywide, this is a multi-year through multiple different phases, so you'll see it over the different years. And we have a couple of small band shell renovation projects that we have listed in here. And then, as we had spoken about, this is the non-parking department funded aspect of the 72nd Street complex. This was always programmed. These are not additional dollars that are increasing the budget. It's just completing that program. And then the convention center, which there were some questions on earlier, this is the list of that. It's
You know, it's tough to digest for me. If we can just go back. Do you have an overview of these? Just go back to the overview of this page. It's like we're getting very little that's like new and cool, right? We're doing a lot of repair, replace, maintain the status quo, but there's no wow, right? And these are a significant amount of taxes that we're imposing on our visitors, and you know, it's not like we're saying, wow, this is what is the next new cool project coming to Miami Beach. You know, yes, we fund that through geo bonds and things like that, but it would be great to be in a point where we're putting this resort tax to really moving our city forward in terms of how we're, you know, some projects that we're attracting, a playground on Lincoln Road, you know, expanding offerings on the beach walks and things like that, where we're not just maintaining the status quo, but really moving forward. Please. Yeah.
That's absolutely an excellent point, and I think part of the resort also goes towards GMCVB and marketing and those types of dollars.
Not these, but yes.
Okay.
Some of these dollars go for Cultural Arts Council from this funding source.
Got it. And in addition to physical, tactical things, something that you've advocated for, Commissioner, which I've co-sponsored too, is events that circulate around huge, like FIFA that's coming next year. I don't know if anybody saw the light show last night. It was spectacular. It was so fun, so exciting, so amazing. So bringing world-class things to our city is so important. We're iconic, and I just wanted to make that comment.
Yeah, thank you. I love that point. I don't know if I wasn't paying attention, but I saw the FIFA Light Show in arrears on Facebook. I don't know how I somehow missed that, but yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. So we were going to talk about the convention center, which is almost entirely capital replacement type projects. Again, talk about capital replacement. It's an asset that already exists, and we're going to be doing renovations to it. So on the next two slides, we have a list of projects in here. Your big dollars are there, or south wall repairs that are needed. Roof replacement has a couple different funding sources. It's important to note that when the big project was done 8-10 years ago, the roof was not replaced. That was separate. It was always known that it would be now. And this is the second of 3 years of funding for that. It's a total of, I think, around $8 million through the different funding sources. We funded the same last year, and we'll fund probably around the same amount next year. So this is a big, expensive asset, but it's an asset that pays for itself. It is not coming from specifically our property taxes or anything like that. So that's important. And when we highlight Project 314, $2.5 million to replace the light fixtures. That's going to replace the fixtures and all the lighting systems to go to more of an LED system. And we've had meetings with consultants and FPL. We're hopeful of an energy efficiency savings that we'll have operating on the operating side going forward. And then again, here more convention center projects, the roof replacement, there's the $7 of the million, HVAC replacement. So it's not super interesting stuff, but it's important to keep the asset maintained and keep it in good working order and to project a quality asset, you know, to our people coming for conferences and conventions.
And I don't want to get too far off topic, but we're talking about the convention center. I don't know who I'm asking this question to, Mr. City Manager, maybe I'll pose to you. What are our plans with 17th Street? Is there some sort of long-term project there?
So there is a long-term project on 17th Street, but ultimately the timing of that project is such that we would not be able to undertake it prior to the completion of the convention center, hotel, sorry. And so I would suggest that we do some, small-scale improvements on there to increase the ability to get back and forth between the City Hall Convention Center campus and Lincoln Road, but not necessarily look at tackling that whole reconstruction of 17th Street.
And what is that project, just very high level?
So there are multiple projects that make it up, but ultimately it's the 17th Street improvement from Washington to Alton.
Maybe we just look at something as simple as repaving it. Right now, it looks like Fallujah. It's embarrassing, right? Singapore, they went from a third world economy to one of the world's leading economies, and it was because the president essentially sat there and said, we need to improve the look and cleanliness of our city, and they started with the airports because that's the first thing people notice and the last thing that they notice, and that's what leaves a lasting impression on visitors. So to have this billion-dollar asset of the convention center and pride ourselves on having things like Art Basel and the boat show and all these great events and FIFA coming, and then you look outside and I don't know, are we proud that that's Miami Beach on 17th Street? Like, is that the first and last impression that we want from people going to the convention center? And I get we probably haven't done so because there's this looming longer-term project, but we have to be more realistic. And if these things are 5 or 10 years down the pike, we can't just live with the conditions that it looks like right now.
Thank you. So we'll bring it back up. So we're going to move into parking funds.
Right. So the parking fund, similar to Convention Center Fund, has its own funding source, and this is from the revenues that we collect from the parking garages and the on-street parking. We have several projects that are recommended. We went through the list with the parking team as well as the facilities team. Most of these projects, again, are renewal and replacement of our existing assets. The biggest item here is a portion of the parking's expenditures for the 72nd Street project. That's a $2.02 million. And as Jason has been saying, this is not an increase to the project. This is just the funding that was previously programmed. And it just continues on. We have a parking deck project that is $3.8 million. And again, the big ticket item is the 72nd Street. This completes the $25 million that's programmed overall in FY26. And then we have a 5th and Alton garage here. and then another 15 Alton Garage project, and this is just the city's portion of this project. The transportation fund, this slide is very short. As we mentioned at the budget retreat back in May, the transportation fund, while they don't have a structural deficit, we anticipate that next year, once we decide what new kind of trolley we're gonna have, we may have some funding, difficulties. So what we're recommending is just a few bike lane projects, and then we can move on to utilities. Yeah, we're just funding a couple of bike lane projects. We have a funding swap and a total appropriation of $297,000.
And then we're going to get into our utilities, which is going to be our water, sewer, and stormwater, as we touched on a little bit earlier today. So for the 2026, there's approximately $105 million in project requests for water and sewer. We have approximately $5.3 million available, mostly related to earned interest on bonds that we still have for projects that are under construction, leaving us around $100 million in unfunded water and sewer projects. We are recommending for the first time, to dip into not the operating reserve, but there is a set aside a renewal and replacement reserve that we put aside reserves related to depreciation expense plus 10%, so that there's dollars available to replace the assets as as we need to on some of these elements. So we're recommending to dip 14.9 out of the $15.7 million of the renewal and replacement reserve for water and sewer to fund really what is, by Public Works, the most critical needs that they need to get done and get funded outside of us getting around to over the next number of months to begin discussing again utility rates and future bond programs. So there's only a few projects that are listed here, mostly split funded, is the FDUT Alton Road utility relocation that gets through multiple funding sources. This we are under contract to execute. The commission approved an interlocal agreement with the state to deliver these dollars as the state is doing the renovation work on Alton Road. This is Michigan to 43rd Street. This will fund our portion of the utility repairs and rehabilitation in that area. Then items 460 and 61 we are under agreements with the state, federal government for consent decrees to get this $2.5 million worth of work done, so we have to fund that. And in 58 and 59, the wastewater pump station is one wastewater pump station. That is the rehab of the pump station at Mount Sinai. And the water pump stations are at Terminal Island and Bell Island. Those three pump stations are considered the tippy-top most important priorities from the Public Works Department, so we did find enough dollars to get those highest priorities done.
And Jason, before we move on from this, and first I do apologize for that reference comparing 17th Street to Fallujah. I forgot about the significant undertaking our Marines took in repairing the streets of Fallujah, so I didn't mean to offend our friends in Iraq comparing it to 17th Street. See that? But First Street, where's that?
The First Street project funding is it's not for this year, right? Is it next year? Yeah, there 26.
How much is that? Ballpark.
Give us
100 million.
100 million,
Yeah,
right?
that's a significant
Where
project.
do we get that?
First Street project is one of our neighborhood improvement projects, and it has three, let's call it really four funding sources. Water and sewer, stormwater, which are bond issuances. As we have the rates, we go out and bond the issues, that funds those dollars. And the other one is our above ground. So that's going to come either from, there's some dollars in the GEO bond to cover some of that. PAYGO can cover part of that. And then grants. So many of these projects, including First Street, have significant grant donations, appropriations from the state and federal government on many of these neighborhood improvement projects. So that one has a lot of the funding. It was broken into commission in a couple different phases. And we're hopeful, I think it's 27, has some additional funding requirements for First Street to get that across the finish line on a funding perspective. But that's probably part of that. If I mentioned earlier, the $116.3 million needed in water and sewer in 27 and $123.7 in stormwater needed in FY27. A year from now, I'm sure First Street is an element of that. So yes, that is an important neighborhood improvement project, probably right in line behind West Avenue, which is a little bit further along, and then First Street will be right behind.
But for both of these, it's not as if we have a bucket of this money sitting around. We're going to go out and need to raise money if we want to move forward with those critical resiliency projects?
Yes, water and sewer and stormwater, like across this country of ours, those are almost always exclusively funded through the issuance of revenue bonds. That is how those resiliency projects are typically funded. And that is the city's plan, and that's the program, and we will have a robust discussion, I think, about that in the next couple of months as we determine if we're, going to be moving forward full force on that. Yeah.
And that kind of ties into the discussion if we want to move forward with those projects, given that they're unfunded and we would need to fund them through the issuance of revenue bonds. That gets into the utility rate discussion, correct?
Correct, Commissioner. So let me talk about the stormwater then. The stormwater didn't have a big request this year. The big one is next year. It's only about $9 million in there. We are tapping a lot of the resiliency fund, which is going to get us a lot of the seawalls. There's some additional money for West Avenue Phase 3 aspects on the stormwater aspect. Again, more seawalls at Shane Rowing Center. And I think the important thing is the only thing that we did not fund in the stormwater aspect was some dollars for critical needs because it's matched to the water and sewer side. So there's no reason for us to appropriate stormwater dollars if the water and sewer isn't there. So again, we think hopefully in the next number of months we'll be back, we'll resolve that issue, and we'll probably have an amended capital program that once we get those rates discussions dealt with, we will be coming back in mid-fiscal year 26.
Both, just chime in.
I'm all for repairing our city seawalls. However, my understanding is that the city owns only 6% of the seawalls. Is that correct? I don't know, is that a fair question?
I would be lying if I told you I knew it was exactly 6%, but it's somewhere in that less than 10 range.
So here's my question. We're talking about all these unfunded projects. We're talking about the repair and replace, and the sooner we do it, the less expensive it is, right? Because every year we delay, the more expensive it becomes, especially in the next few years. Given that if we had 50% of the seawalls, if they were within our domain, that would make a difference. Given that it's less than 10%, and it's a significant amount of money, it's $6 million. Might we be better served? And I don't know if this is a capital improvements question or an Amy Knowles question. I don't know if she's here, but a resiliency question. Might we be better served by using some of that money or all of that money for stormwater issues, other things that are critical repair and replace issues that we need to do but will be more expensive when we get to it eventually? And I mean, it's not that I don't want to do the seawalls, but because it's just such a tiny little amount. Unless there's I know the one, for instance, at the end of Bonita Drive floods all the time. So maybe that's one that we would do, but I don't know if all of them are like that. And if they're not, then maybe we don't look at it as we do all of it at once.
Well, I was just going to say, I've had many discussions about the seawalls with Amy, and part of the intent of getting the city-owned seawalls completed as quickly as possible was for our own resiliency, of course, but also to encourage how can we be telling the private citizens to upgrade their seawalls and do that investment if we don't do it? Also, the cost of seawalls has gone up significantly in the last few years, and the more that we wait and delay, the more expensive it will be. About 5 years ago, they were $1,500 per linear foot, and now it's over $3,000. So it is an important project, something to complete, and I'll let the city manager chime in.
I was going to say exactly the same thing, so well said. And I would just add that each one is an individual case, and we don't have all the funding for all of the seawalls currently. And so we are prioritizing. We are prioritizing the ones where we have the biggest vulnerabilities to make sure that we're not creating problems by overtopping of seawalls in areas where obviously we don't want to have anybody having their seawall overtopped.
Okay.
If I
And
could-
then if I can just, sorry, Jason, if I could just ask, long before, when I was just a baby activist, I remember approaching a commissioner about doing a program where when the city was nearby a residential neighborhood, those neighbors could be apprised and they could be offered a way into doing their seawall repairs concurrently to try to tag on to the savings or the efficiencies. And I sort of laughed out of town on that. And is that something that's ever been contemplated? Is that something, I know it's complicated, but, but if we're trying to encourage people to do theirs, wouldn't an additional incentive be, we're coming to your neighborhood in a year from now to do the seawall at X location. This would be a great time for you to jump in and do yours as well, and here's who to contact and here's how to get it going.
So I think you and I may have even talked about that at one point in time.
Maybe after I was laughed out of town by the commissioner.
And I think that, you know, the private property adaptation program is a great way for folks to tap into city resources to help with doing seawall improvements. Also,
The PPA doesn't link a resident with the people who are coming to do the seawall. It just helps mitigate the cost.
correct, it does
So I'm
not.
talking about how do you link them to the people who are coming to do the seawall? Because wouldn't it be more efficient for everybody to, you know, instead of doing just the property that the city owns, do the 4 adjacent properties as well?
And I think what we had talked about is maybe making the pool of contractors that are doing seawalls for the city available to the public, and maybe trying to see if there's some sort of bulk rate that the private property owners would be able to tap into.
And communications about this is when it's happening, you know, reach out to a contact person so we can start aligning.
There are a few challenges to that, but I will absolutely ask our team to take a look at how we can maybe facilitate individuals that may want to join us in getting more resilient, but might have some hurdles.
Is that something that needs to come to a commission meeting and then be referred to be discussed, or is this administrative?
So we'll talk about that with our environment and sustainability folks, and I'll let you know whether or not we need an item.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Rosa Gonzalez.
I'd like to, if possible, whenever, Mr. Chair, if I can speak.
Please.
Thank you. I just want to echo Commissioner Dominguez's point that, you know, I think we lead by example. I think it's imperative that we make sure that the seawalls do get repaired. It's a cascading effect. We do ours, and then the neighbor next door does his, and so on and so forth. So I think that's a great point that Commissioner Dominguez brought up, and it's certainly a priority for me.
Thank you. And Ralph, go ahead.
Commissioner Rosa Gonzalez is watching the meeting, and she wanted me to read this into the record. The students at the Shane Center have been waiting for 15 years for the seawall. It's falling apart and it's dangerous.
Thank you. We'll bring up the presentation. Okay, so we're going to go on to other funds. So the city has many other funds. This is kind of a catch-all for some other capital funds.
Yeah, so again, it's a catch-all, and also we have a lot of geo bonds that have interest income. Sometimes we have projects that are on hold and we're earning interest. And so here we're just allocating any extra dollars that we have so that we are appropriating before we use our PAYCO dollars. So one of the major ones we're funding here is a Marine Patrol facility. It had been fully funded, but the bids came in higher. So we do have a capital reserve fund that is set aside for when bids come in higher on our project. So we're funding that by $4.3 million. AIPP, we have artwork throughout the city, and we have started to appropriate $75,000 each year in order to restore those assets. And then we also have the next page that has, again, a lot of little funds. The major item here is a vehicle and equipment replacement of $9.6 million, and that's to replace our vehicles in the general fund with cash. And the only other one I'll bring up is 520, which is a unidad shoring and structural repairs. So we do have an arts and cultural bond project, and when facilities went in to do the project, they found that there were some shoring and structural repairs that were required. We actually did a budget amendment during FY25 to start the funding, and so we're recommending 1.8 in FY26, and then next year we'll come back for the other 1.8 as necessary.
The vehicle replacement, quite a large line item.
Yes.
Do we do this, is this bulky? Do we do this once every how many years? Or is this essentially, we do it on a kind of ongoing basis?
Yeah, this, if I may, and Tamika will jump in if I'm off a little bit here, this is an annual allocation. It varies based on the replacement cycle of the fleet. As you know, our fleet division wins national awards and their management of their programs. So it's ensuring that, you know, our fleet is replaced from an efficiency perspective, both, you know, in maintenance and things along those lines. But the city had previously, to when we for myself getting on board, had been using a line of credit and been borrowing money to kind of keep it as a smooth amount. And in, I think, 2 budget cycles ago, when we had a nice increase, we converted that weaned ourselves off of debt, and we're able to go to a cash funding. So we're actually getting ourselves a benefit as we begin to pay that debt off over the next 2 to 3 years left. So.
And does our fleet, as we term it like that, include police and fire vehicles, or would that
Mostly.
be? Okay.
A lot of it is going to be your police and fire in that aspect.
Just while we're on it, Will, I'll kind of pick your ear on this. You'll realize that self-servingly, I'm like the golf cart czar. One thing just I ask you to consider, I'm not going to put my heavy thumb on this, but for parking, it's never made sense to me why we have our parking agents driving around these large pickup trucks, right? It just does not make sense. I think golf carts would be incredible when I see them, and they'll drive down West Avenue and then have to find a place to park, which is usually have to be illegally parked, which is quite ironic because of how large the vehicles are. And I can't imagine that driving a pickup truck around town is fuel, energy, or environmentally efficient. I can't imagine that our parking agents need such large vehicles. It's just always bewildered me why we don't have something smaller and more efficient, whether it's a golf cart or like those police cars, the mini cars that they have up in New York City and things like that. So while you're kind of looking at revamping the department, that's just something that anecdotally I see each and every day about why we can't be more efficient. So just to keep in mind.
And Commissioner, if I can answer, it's interesting you brought that up because I remember you had that conversation with me, and actually I relayed that information to Will, and he wholeheartedly agrees with you, and he'll be looking at that fleet. Just this fleet is not parking; it has its own funding source. But regardless, I did relay that information to the new director, and he does agree with you, and he'll be looking at his fleet.
Wow, I take back what I said about you.
Thank you.
Good job.
And just
Through the
to add-
chair, if you got a second?
Yes, please.
I'd like to mention on the fact for efficiency, specifically for parking. I think that's why we instituted the pilot traffic decal program. So we don't necessarily have to have our parking enforcement officers driving around, using license plate readers that sometimes don't even work. And it's really a community-driven approach where if you're in your neighborhood, you notice a car that's not there, doesn't have a decal, pick up the phone, you call parking, and if it's not, then they get towed. So talk about ways for driving efficiency for our parking department. I think a community-based effort is, we're going to be testing that. Thank you.
Thank you. We bring it up, and we're going to show you kind of our next steps. We mentioned a little bit, but I'll let Tamika finish this out here.
Sure. So we are already started working on the July 11th FERC presentation that we're going to have. We're eagerly waiting the July 1 property values that will come out. We'll send out an LTC as soon as we have the numbers from the property appraiser. Hopefully we'll get a little increase in our values. On July 23rd, we'll take an item to the commission recommending the maximum millage rates. As of today, we're recommending to keep the overall millage rate flat. And then in August, when the commission is on recess, we're going to prepare the budget book. So you'll come back to 3 large budget books. So you'll have all the details you need in order to make some informed decisions at our September 11th and September 30th commission meetings. And then we'll restart the budget in October.
Okay. And that concludes the FERC budget briefing workshop on the capital budget. And we'll be back again on July 11th for a capital update and with our July 1st valuation operating.
Yeah, I know you two were the spokesman and woman, and on the front lines of this. Incredible job. Thank you for this. But as you see by the many people in this audience, a lot of work went into this. And I'm sure it's not just the people in this audience. You're all representing different departments and teams of folks. So thank you for the entirety of this effort. Our budget process is one of the most critical things that we go through all year. The audit adage, show me your budget, I'll show you your priorities. I don't know if that is any more applicable anywhere other than municipal government. So thank you all for all of your work and effort. It's going to be an ongoing process. We're all in this together. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Yeah. Before the meeting is adjourned, I just want to follow up on one issue that I have not heard about that I believe was discussed at FERC at some point. I know that the Public Safety Neighborhood Quality of Life Committee discussed it substantially, which was the mobile police substations. We had initiated an item back, actually, in 2024, we had initiated an item about this, and it's been ongoing. And I know the city manager did a memo back in February of this year. And I just want to know, is that being contemplated in this budget? I didn't hear it come up as part of the operating budget. I didn't hear it come up as part of the capital budget. So Mr. Manager, or perhaps the police chief, could tell me where that's being contemplated. We had initiated the conversation with doing, a substation at City Hall or in the Collins Park vicinity. Then Vice Mayor David Suarez came up with a suggestion that to be able to be more fluid with it and take it to areas of high demand, depending where the need is, that we do the mobile substation. So I just need an update of where we're at with that in the budget, because I just haven't heard it come up at all.
I can answer that, Commissioner. It wasn't brought up today because it is part of the operating budget, so that would be one that would be discussed and debated at the July 11th. But yes, that is listed as I'm aware that is listed as a budget enhancement. That did go through committee, through commission, and is on the list.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you all.